Okay.
You're watching SKST Radio.
Well, welcome to another episode of SKST Radio, Small Business Network. And this is Grayson, your host, and I have a new friend. He goes by the name of Bill Koenecke. Bill, welcome to the show.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on the show. I'll tell you a little bit about myself.
All right.
And the way I pronounce my name is Koenecke, but that's
Koenecke. I said it wrong. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I just go by Bill. But yeah,
okay, Bill.
I'm from Murray, Kentucky, and I'm an educator. 45 years. I'm retired. I've taught at 3 universities. I started out as a high school chemistry teacher and ended up as a university professor, and then an author and a self-publisher. So I basically started out young as a teacher, and I only spent 3 years teaching, and then I got into school administration.
Gotcha.
I was a high school principal at age 23 and a superintendent at age 34. Wow. I have 5 earned college university degrees. I've taught at 3 universities.
Wow.
And the main reason I got into writing was that I had so many students and teachers who were not very good in grammar, punctuation, and writing. And I have to admit that I was not very good in it and still am not, but I have improved immensely after writing my first book on that topic. And here's the first book, Right Well, Right Now.
I absolutely love it. I need that book.
No, it's a good, simple book to improve your grammar. It's simple things. It's not for English majors. It's for people like me who struggled in English all my life, but I ended up having to improve because of all the things I had to write in my administrative jobs and so forth as a college professor, and I had to get tenure and I had to publish and all that stuff. So that's why I wrote the first book, was to help students who, for some reason, just did not think grammar was important or struggle with grammar. And I had my share of struggles as well. My second book is not out yet, but it's coming out soon.
Okay.
And this is the working copy of the cover.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it.
What it is how to study smarter, not harder, and improve your study skills. 77 ways to improve your study skills in just a few minutes a day. And it has a plethora of techniques that are from people who have actually used these, like doctors and lawyers and professors and teachers that have actually used them, and they work. And they're simple things that anyone can do to improve their study skills and spend less time and make better grades. So that's a little bit of my background. Any questions that you?
Yeah, absolutely. I got tons of them. So what inspired? So you were an educator, then you were principal, and so you decided to just keep it going, keep educating. You didn't want to just stop at retirement. You just wanted to keep going. That's what inspired you to write?
Well, that, and also the fact that through my different positions, I have had so many teachers that I've interviewed and sent in resumes, and some, unfortunately, were English teachers that made all kinds of errors, grammatical errors, spelling errors. And I think part of the problem was that they were just too lazy and didn't think it was important enough to correct them, because some of the errors were so simple that I don't understand why they got them wrong. I think it was just carelessness on their part. And rather than going back and proofing it several times and maybe even getting someone else to prove it, they just figured they'd send it in and I'd probably just briefly look at it and accept it. But I had a rule that if I had more than 3 grammatical errors in a application, I didn't even read it.
Oh,
I just put
wow.
it in another pile. And so when I told my students when I taught at the university that, they said, "Well, that's not fair. You shouldn't, not read the resume and stuff that have errors in it." I said, "Why should I read it? They're applying for a job for me, and I want teachers who can speak and write and do it correctly. And so if
Absolutely.
they don't take the trouble and the time to get it corrected and look at it the other way, why would they do that stuff when they taught? So I don't want to hire those people." And I said, "You just have to get with the program and just accept it. I'm not the only one that is a person who believes that your written language is the first introduction many people see to you, or so if you don't do a very good job, your first impression is not good."
Right. Right. Now, so with all the different apps and things out there for grammar now, it to me it just seemed like it's no excuse for not being able to have correct grammar when writing. Do you
Well,
agree?
I agree somewhat, but English is such a funny language. I was a high school chemistry teacher, so English has always been a mystery to me. But English is so, for example, used to you could not begin a sentence with a preposition, and you couldn't end a preposition with a sentence with a preposition. But you know what? They changed that, and now it's permissible. They don't recommend it in formal writing, but people do it all the time, and I do it too. And but in formal writing, I don't do it because I think that's a bad impression. But English is an ever changing thing, and now for another thing that they've done. Used to you had to have a single subject and a single verb and a single object all together, but now you can say he went to the show and so forth, and their show. You can use a plural pronoun rather than a singular pronoun, which is against grammar, but people do it all the time, and they've accepted now. So English is so situational, and so many people just murder the grammar, but they say, "Well, I got the point across." So that's why a lot of people, and I think texting has contributed to the problem too,
I
because
was going to ask you about that.
I make all kinds of mistakes, including myself, when I text. And I try to go back and check it, and I have a spell checker, but sometimes it slips right by me.
Mhm.
So what
Mhm.
I try to tell people is no one's perfect. I make my fair share of errors, but you need to have people proof your work, and you definitely need to prove it a couple of times and then send it out. You still have a few errors, but you have a lot less errors.
Mhm.
So that's just
Absolutely.
my feeling. And I know there's some people that they don't teach grammar like they used to in schools either, in high schools.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they got the people like you were just saying. They send in their resumes with grammar errors,
Right. Right.
and so if they don't know any better, they're certainly not going to instill it in our children that they're educating.
I'll tell you a couple things that I found out that I couldn't believe. I was in teacher preparation for about 11 years, student teaching and that kind of stuff at the end of my career. And I found out that the people who teach English are not required at our university. They may be at other universities to take a grammar class. And I thought that was kind of strange. And so I had a couple of discussions with my colleagues in English, and they said, "Oh, they know their grammar. They don't need to take it." I said, "Well, that's funny." I said, "The ones I get don't know it, and they go through your program. So I guess I just get the ones that didn't learn it." "No, no, they all know it." I said, "Well, why aren't they showing it then?" And I showed them a couple of papers, and they said, "Well, that's just outliers. So we don't have many kids like that." I said, "It's funny because I have a lot of them like that." But they never did change while I was there. They had a class that was elective in grammar, and
Hmm.
hardly anybody took the class because they claimed they knew their grammar and they took other classes. And so we put some teachers out there that were English teachers that could not write well. They could not, they didn't know their grammar, and they just, I don't know. I don't see how they kept their job,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Well,
they apparently did.
but you heard about this big thing that's going on now. Maybe I don't know if you have or not, but they had maybe over 1,900 nurses was certified fakely, and so all these people are administering meds and all kinds of things, and they really didn't have a formal degree.
I've heard about stuff like that. I'll even go one better that you probably won't believe this, but years ago, I was in a smaller town and I was younger, and they had a doctor in town, and it was a small community, and everybody just loved this doctor. Some of my family went to this doctor, and come find out this guy did not have a medical degree. He had faked his med license because he had worked in
Oh
as
my
a
gosh.
custodian or something in a medical college, and some guy died that was a doctor, and some way he took his name and faked it, and this guy's practicing medicine in this town for a number of years and did not even have an MD degree.
Oh wow.
So it happens, and I guess people liked him. People in my family thought he was a great doctor, but he was not
Great
legal.
bedside manners, huh?
So things happen. It's weird how things happen, but anyway, I'm more excited about my book that's coming out on how to study smarter, not harder, and I really wanted to talk more about that book
Well, let's do it.
because I do have 5 degrees and they're all earned, so I do know how to study. I may not be able to write that well, but I write fairly well too. But I do know how to study. So what I'm going to do, I have a thing that I'll send anyone that's interested in. It's my top 10 or 10 ways to study smarter, not harder.
Okay.
And, I based this on David Letterman. You remember David
I
Letterman?
do.
A few years ago, and he had what we call the top 10 list or some kind of
Mm-hmm.
list. So I don't remember on his list. They were more things that were in order of things that were kind of funny, top 10 list. But mine is just on top 10, and there's tons of ways to do this. My
Okay.
first thing that I want to talk about is the old thing called note cards or flashcards.
Okay.
And I have used that for 50 some years and actually have written my first book and the second book using note cards, flashcards. And I think it's one of the best ways to study almost any topic. It works better in topics that have to do with science and math and things that are more fact orientated. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work as well in courses that are more orientated toward English and history, although it can work in those because you can use it for dates and stuff as well. But what you do is you get flashcards. I usually use the ones that are this size, but you can use
Okay.
any. And on the front side, you put the fact, and on the second side, back side, you put the definition. But you don't put the formal definition of the fact. You put your own understanding in your own words of the fact, and
Okay.
you do one for each fact, and then you put them in some kind of a box or some kind of a recipe box, and you go through them. And there's several ways to do it. The best way is where you put them in piles. You go through them, and the ones you know very well, you put in another pile, and you very seldom look at those again because you already know them.
Mm-hmm.
The ones you don't know, you put in another pile and you go through them and keep dwindling the pile down until you have hardly any.
Oh
And that
wow. That's pretty
will
cool.
be, and it's a great way and it's cheap. You go buy the flashcards at Walmart or someplace and you keep them and you review them right before the test and so forth. And it's really a great way to study. And another way to study is to self-test yourself, is to make questions up based on the lecture and also
Okay.
on the textbook as to what you think will be on the test. And there's ways to do that. And that'll be in my book as to how you determine what might be on the test. But just give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
If a professor in class says you might want to know that because you're going to see it again, bingo, that's something you may have on a test. So you want to be sure you know that. Another way is to read the chapter in a quick way, and you can do that by looking at things in italics or things in bold print or the first sentence in a paragraph or the
Mm-hmm.
summary. Read all that and don't even read the rest of the chapter, just skim through it, and you pick up the principles, the main principles, because you're going to probably see those on the
Oh wow.
test and learn those and put those on your flashcards and
Mm-hmm.
go through them and do this over a period of a week or two. Don't wait to study for a test the night before. Some people do that. I never was good at that. But you start about a week or so before the test, and you spend about 30 minutes at a time studying.
Okay.
You know why you only want to study for 30 minutes at a time and take a break?
Why?
Well, because you tend to remember the first thing you study and the last thing you study. So if you study for a couple, 3 hours, you remember 2 or 3 things. But if you study 30 minutes at a time, take a
Oh,
5-minute
good little
break,
tip.
and then another 30 minutes and do that, 3 or 4 days before the test, you'll remember better because you remember several first things and several last things. And
Wow.
so there's several others. Let's see. I got some others here. Let me kind of go through it real quick. See, I got a little bit of time,
Yeah,
and
you do.
you have some questions, but those are a couple, 3 of the really good ones. Okay, let's see. What's another one here? Practice, practice, practice. And you don't have to practice, hours and hours, but you do have to practice some, and you have to space it over time. That's a good tip. Another one is to, let's see, what's another one here? Use pictures and diagrams and graphs, because a lot of people are visual learners. I happen to be both a visual learner and an auditory learner. But there's an old saying, you probably heard it before: a picture is worth 1,000 words, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
And so when you study, I would even go so far as to say on your flashcards, you draw pictures on the back of the flashcards for an answer. There are graphs on the back, because you can see that it's visual, and that helps you learn.
I love it.
Another one is to be organized and make a plan, and take and study that plan. Have you ever heard of a thing called the to-do list?
I have.
Yeah, I used to use that, and I still use it. And you make a to-do list of what's the most 10 important things you want to do that day, and you organize them in order of priority. And you work on the first one, which is the one you want to complete first, if possible. If it takes all day or it takes another day, you complete that and go to the next. Then each day you reprioritize that list, and it helps you get things done. It helps you meet deadlines, and so there's a bunch of others in the book, but
Wow. That's an exciting book.
Yeah, and what I will do, anybody who emails me, I will send them a list of my article I published on 10 suggestions on how to study smarter, not harder.
Okay, I love it.
These things on it, but hopefully they'll buy the book, because the book will be more detailed. But this will be a couple.
So tell us about the second book now.
That is the second book.
That was the second book. Okay.
Yeah.
So
first book is English grammar, punctuation, writing.
Right.
Tell you a little
Okay.
bit about it too, though. For example,
Let's see that cover again.
Yeah, put that cover up there.
That's beautiful.
Now,
yeah, I like that one.
Commas are a big problem for most people, but you know what? On page 72 and 73 of my book here, I can tell you a way to never ever make another comma mistake.
Okay.
Never ever. Okay. So here's what you do. There's about 40 rules on commas, and some are real similar and some are okay, but there's about 6 or 7 rules that almost never fail. For example, if you have a sentence that starts with yes, if it's a long sentence, you almost always put a comma after yes. Okay, there's a thing called essential clauses and non-essential clauses that occur in a sentence. And if the clause is essential, you don't put a comma before it or after it. But if it's non-essential, you put a comma before it and a comma after it.
Okay.
And there's 3 or 4 more. But anyway, you memorize those 6 rules. Okay, you got to memorize 6 rules. That's pretty simple. You memorize them. So if you see a sentence and it fits one of those rules, it's probably correct comma-wise, right?
Right.
Because those rules are pretty standard. There's very deviation. There's some exceptions. If it's a short sentence, you don't have to put a comma after a yes in a sentence. But by and large, those are. Now, here's the problem. What if you write a sentence or see a person or see a sentence that does not fit one of those 6 rules? What would you do?
What would you do? You use your best judgment?
I could do that, but I want it where it's correct, and it's always correct. So your judgment may not be correct. Any other suggestions? There's a couple things you could do, and one is really, really simple.
What?
Okay, you could go back and look at all those other 30 some rules and try to find one that fit, but that's a lot of work. I don't
That's a
want
lot of work.
I don't want to. So you know what I do?
What?
I just rewrite that sentence to fit one of those six.
That's the easiest way to do it.
And we do that all the time. You just don't know it.
Wow.
You'll never ever make another common mistake. Now, you may make some dangling participle errors. You may have some tense errors. You may do all kind of errors otherwise, but you won't make any more comma errors. Now, those sentences are going to be six different ones. So
Okay.
they're not going to be intellectual and they're not going to be earth-shaking, but they are going to be correct comma-wise. And that's what we want to do, is communicate succinctly and clearly to people. And so we write way too many long sentences. We need to write sentences that are shorter, medium sentences. We don't need these long 30-word sentences, because most people don't remember that. Do you remember
Right.
a 30, 40-word sentence is too long? 10 words at the most, and you make some 5 words, some 10 words, and you
Yeah.
mix them up. But it's not going to be an intellectual thing, but by and large, we write way too many long sentences.
Yeah.
Try to be too educated, and we just want to get the point across. So there's some other tips. For example, you ever use who and whom?
Who and who?
Who and whom?
Who and whom? Oh, yes.
Yeah,
To whom this may concern.
right. Okay. Well, there's 3 rules. One of them I made up myself, but there's 3 rules as to how you'll hardly ever miss another who or whom sentence.
Okay.
First one is, if it's she or he, most of the time you use who, because it's a subject.
Right.
If it's an object and it's something like them or their, something like that, you typically use whom. But there's some exceptions. So I have a third rule.
Okay.
Why use who or whom? Just rewrite the sentence and leave it out, and you'll never ever miss a who or whom sentence.
I love it.
So there's a number of tips like that in the book, and
Okay.
so that's the first book. But second book is the How to Study Smarter, Not Harder book. So I think this will probably be my last book, because I want to do some speaking and I want to get on some other podcasts. And so I'm going to try to do some marketing and hopefully do some other podcasts, and also maybe do some workshops and speeches within driving distance of Murray, Kentucky. I'm not interested in getting on airplanes and flying all over. I did some of that when I worked for Johnson Controls, and I was a lot younger then. I'm 77 now. So if I do workshops and speeches, it's going to be within driving distance, and not 2 or 3 times a week, maybe once or twice a month, unless I really get popular. I could be convinced to do more if I get popular. But I really want to help people improve their study habits and also their English grammar. And they don't have to be teachers, or they can be in any field, because no matter what field you're in, you have to write and you have to speak. And you're judged many times on how you do that. Unfortunately, shouldn't be that way maybe, but that's the way it is. You usually don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Exactly. I've heard that before as well.
That's true. I've certainly made my what would you call it, mistakes, and did things at the first that I had to change later. But I can remember several cases that I probably said the wrong thing and didn't get the job. Maybe it was good, I don't know. But you are judged on how you look, how you speak.
First impressions. Absolutely.
That's the way it is. It's the way life is.
So Bill, if you could give some words of wisdom to someone who is absolutely horrible at writing, what would your words of wisdom be?
Well, I guess I could tell them to buy my book.
Buy your book? I thought about that.
Because I have a whole chapter or 2 on how to write, and that's another topic that we could talk about, but take a while. But basically, you have to have a topic sentence, and you have to have paragraphs, and you have to build on that, and you have to have ideas, and you have to have conclusions, and it's just logical. But you practice, and you have to write, and you have to have other people critique your work. A friend of mine, this is actually one of my mentors, has written 50 books and 100 articles, and he actually writes to help people right. That's what he
Mhm.
does. He's expert in that. He was telling me one day that when he first started writing, he used to proof his stuff 10 times. And I said, really? 10 times? Oh, yeah. I said, well, do you still do that after 50 books? And he said, no, I just proof it 2 or 3 times. But said, I always, even when I proofed it 10 times, always get another person who is an expert to read my stuff and help give me suggestions and to proof it. Always do that, because he said when you proof your own work, it is difficult to catch
Yeah.
some mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's another thing I'd tell people. Always have people, find an English teacher or find someone good in English.
Mhm.
I'll tell you another story that's a true story. When I had doctoral students at Illinois State, I was teaching school law because I've been sued 5 times and I won all cases. So I was a visiting professor, and I had a principal. I won't tell you his name nor his school, but he was in a large school, and he had to do a piece of the doctoral stuff on school law, and I had to proof that stuff and prove it. So he sent it to me, and he had tons of errors. I mean, I could not believe it. So I called him and I said, did you write that? Oh, yeah. He said, I wrote it. I said, did you ever get it proofed? He said, no, I just wrote it. I said, well, it's terrible. I'm not going to proof it. And he said, well, what am I going to do? And I said, do you have any English teachers in your high school? Well, yeah, I got about 10 of them. Well, is any of them, are they good English teachers? Oh, yeah. I said, you need to talk to one of them and take him or her out and buy them a steak dinner and have them proof your work and then resubmit it. Oh, you can't do that, can you? I said, what do you mean you can't do that? People do it all the time. They said,
Yeah.
really, I didn't know you could do that. I said, so you do that and then you send it back to me. And it improves significantly just by
Wow.
having an English teacher in his high school just read through that and give them suggestions and make some corrections. And you can do that. There's
Yeah.
no law against that. It's just good writing to get other people to proof your work. So that'd be my suggestion. You got to practice. You got to write. You have to have other people look at it, and you have to be willing to take criticism. And
Yeah.
that's the only way to get better in almost anything.
Right. Right.
Practice, and that's what it takes.
They
And I
say
have,
practice make perfect.
well, it does if you practice correctly. If you don't practice correctly, it makes it worse. It does. I remember a golfer guy I knew that was working on his hook or slice, and he kept doing it the same way. Well, he kept getting the same results, and he practiced, but it just still he had that hook. So practice works, but you got to practice perfectly.
Yeah,
You got to do it
absolutely.
correct. So that'd be my suggestion. And
I absolutely
you
love
got
it.
to get better, but you got to be willing to put some effort on it.
Effort into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Bill, tell people how to get your book.
Well, the best way you can get it on the first book you can get on Amazon.com. It's a print book and an ebook, and my second book will soon be on Amazon.com when I get it finished and when I get it published, which should be a few months. But you can also go to my email and my website, and you can order it over the website. The book is $14.95, and the ebook is like $5.95 or something like that. And
Okay.
so my website is https://www.writewellrightnow.com, and it's WRITEWELLRIGHTNOT.org, and that's my website. And
Okay.
both books will be on there. So, but the best way to contact me is my email address, which is writewellrightnow.gmail.
I love it. Absolutely love it. We'll also put that in the comments on our YouTube. Guys, please go buy the book. Support this young man here. He knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about, and he's got it going on. Thank you so much, Bill, for being on the show.
Well, Cammie, I appreciate the opportunity to be on. So I thank you for allowing me to come on and tell my spiel.
Oh, I love it. We're going to have you back too when we get the other book ready.
Okay, I'll contact you when the other book comes out. One chapter is done, and all the research is done. As I said before, I've done it on note cards, and so I have all the research done. I have a plethora of techniques. One other final thing is don't study stuff you already know. It's a waste of time. That will save you tons of time. If you already know something, don't worry about it. I mean,
Go
you know
on
it,
to the next
so
one, huh?
go on and study stuff you don't know, right?
Sounds good. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
Okay, guys, this concludes our show. And Bill, thank you for being on the show. Guys, next week, right here, SKST Radio, Small Business Network. Tell them bye, Bill.
Bye bye. Thank you.